And so I want to give you some really useful information on how it happens, what happens, the slippery slope that really comes up, things that can kind of lead into it. And then we're going to talk about solutions and we're going to talk about hope because I would much rather in all of my videos focus on solutions more than causes. But I know that you guys, really like to know why on a lot of stuff, why things come up and how it happens. And so I try to give you guys some of the nuts and bolts of that as well, so you can dig into it. May is Mental Health Month. And, my entire life, I'm going to get into a little bit of my story after my injury, my struggle with anxiety, because I never really dealt with it at all in my entire life. And here's one thing that I will say to the people who have never dealt with anxiety, panic attacks, depression, panic disorder, any of those things. If you've never dealt with it, right? If you have never experienced it, then you cannot understand it. You cannot understand the fear associated with it or the hopelessness that people who are dealing with these different disorders either constantly, like I know people that deal with it all the time, or people that deal with it off and on situationally. You have no idea what they're dealing with. So the one thing that I would completely ask, well, I'm going to say this too. For those of you who have never dealt with it, I'm going to tell you that it isn't nothing. Like when you're like, just be happy. I just don't understand what's going on. Why are these people so anxious and why are they depressed? Everything's great. Look, we have cell phones and DoorDash will bring food to our door. Why are you so upset? Like that attitude on it, like you really have to have a lot of grace and you have to have a lot of compassion because it is, it's paralyzing. For those of you who are dealing with some kind of a mental illness or you have someone close to you who does, and you understand how devastating it is and how paralyzing it is for those people or for yourself, then the thing I would say to you is I see you, I hear you, I completely understand you and where you're at, because not only because of the little bit that I've dealt with, but because of the dozens and dozens and dozens of patients that I've worked with in this realm. I would say that to you. And then the other thing I'd say to you is there is 100% hope in where you're at. But sometimes it's just a long journey to get there, right? So we're going to talk about that too, but I want to go through and I want to talk a little bit about the neurological pathways that happen, and why someone's brain would get to that point. So let's talk about some stuff that you really need to get tested if this is you. It can be a hormonal imbalance. There's a lot of moms that postpartum, when they talk about postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety, there's a lot of stuff that happens with that because of hormonal imbalance. When estrogen gets really high, estrogen goes up and it will take cortisol with it. You guys understand just from our teaching in here and other teachings that cortisol is your stress hormone. So if cortisol gets a lot higher, it's going to create stress internally and it's going to create anxiety because let's talk about this. Like anxiety is basically stress amplified over a period of time, and depression is anxiety gone way too far. Okay. That's just the different stages. It's all the exact same pathway. It's just how intense and how long has it been going on? And how far along is this person? Well, if it is a female, the reason that women have more problems with anxiety and depression than men is because of two things. A, you are generally more estrogen dominant. You should be, because as a female, your body needs estrogen. And so the estrogen being elevated at different times of the month and different phases in your life, like when having kids, then you can have an easier time getting into anxiety and depression. It's a closer doorway for you than someone who doesn't have hormone imbalance, or for guys who don't have that much estrogen. Okay, so we'll say that right there. So it can be a hormone imbalance. If your hormones are out of balance, then you need to get that checked to be able to see what's out of balance, to know how to balance it out. And then that could be a problem. And you may need to take specific things for that over a period of time. Okay. Now people are going to ask me this right away, or they're going to say this in a replay setting. Are you, Dr. Jim Bob, fully against medication in these situations? No, absolutely not. Like, medication is important to save the life of the person or the people around that person when they are going through different mental things, because when you have really serious, intense mental struggles and psychological stressors and issues, it can literally take you out of the reality of what's normal, and you can do things that you weren't intending to do because you're not yourself, right? So sometimes medication is necessary, but medication is not always necessary, because so many times it is literally a neurological or a hormonal imbalance, or it's something that we are doing or not doing to ourselves. Okay, so I'm gonna talk about And I'm going to go into the basic neurological patterns and the balances of the brain that can get off and cause you to go down this slippery slope, okay? Once you balance this and you work on these things and you do these things consistently, you may need a boost. You may need medication. I don't know. That's your deal. And that's something that you need to really know for yourself. But just know that there's hope out there and there's ways to rebalance it. And this isn't like the pit of despair that you're never going to get out of, right? See, Amy, pregnancy hormones here. Exactly. Like that stuff really changes and it changes. Other reasons why someone can get into anxiety and depression, especially for guys, is injury or tragedy. Some kind of a tragic accident or some massive thing that happens, some life change, that can happen. Loss of identity. Like there's so many things, spiritual attack, like just literally the enemy getting in your head and making you believe that you're not worth it, or making you believe that things that, they say like the acronym of fear is false evidence appearing real. Sometimes I think that that's true, but sometimes I think anxiety is when you take fear and it's even normal evidence appearing way out of bounds. It's not necessarily false evidence appearing real. It's real evidence. Like let's say I'm standing out here and I've got we've got a pool in our backyard, and it's real evidence. It's not false evidence. There's a pool right there and everything is safe and everyone is fine. But if I walk outside and I'm dealing with massive anxiety that something is going to happen, that is real evidence being amplified into something is wrong. Okay. That's really a thing. And that's what anxiety is. Anxiety is taking a worry past that point to a fear level. Like it's taking something that is a normal worry and taking it way too far, okay? So let's talk about this for a second. And I want to teach you real briefly what both halves of the brain do. And so what both halves of the brain are responsible for, so that you can understand a little bit more why one side of the brain will lend towards more anxiety. And if it's not corrected, or if it's not worked on, it'll head towards depression, because again, depression is anxiety there for a long period of time with other helpers or without having to diet or anything else. It's just how intense and how long has it been there? And then they've given them different diagnosis, because a diagnosis can be medicated or treated, okay?